Welcome to those who are on Zoom and those of us here in person in the audience. At this point, we'll call for Dean Edozie, who will do an introduction of our guest speaker, our keynote speaker, and just give you some welcoming remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and I'm very sorry again for the late start. It's post-pandemic style these days to have more people online than in person. Once you give an online option, most people elect to be online and not come in person. But that's, the beauty of, the silver lining of the hybrid modality. So welcome everyone to McCormack's DOSS Town Hall. In my fall semester newsletter message, I promised all of you a transformational year. That pivotal year is still unfolding. For example, the McCormack Student Success Agenda has never been stronger as of today's event. We established the first time student success platform as DOSS. That stands for the Dean's Office Student Success Office, and we established that in 2018, almost 5 years ago. Our goals were ambitious. We would set up a program that advances McCormack's student mission. DOSS would be a coordinated support system for graduate and undergraduate student success that engages college and university-wide support services. The program would facilitate student success from recruitment, admissions, teaching and teaching excellence to degree completion and successful post-graduation career placement. And with McCormack's department chairs and program leaders, thank you, Professor Ellen Machanda, and thank you, Professor Sammy Barkin. And I know that there are many professors and program leaders in the audience. But with all of them, program managers as well, and student leaders, student ambassadors, the DOSS program has sought to be an action-oriented student success platform that deepens, complements, and enhances existing graduate and undergraduate student support initiatives at UMass Boston. We've provided students with mentoring, advising, career and financial counseling support. We've expanded student access to professional development resources, including internships, career advice, jobs. We've facilitated the expansion of professional networks between current students, prospective students, and McCormack alumni at events like today. And importantly, to bring us to today's theme, what does students' equity, access, and success mean for McCormack students? This program, the McCormack DOSS program, builds upon existing college-wide programs and initiatives that drive student success. We also build upon very creative methodologies of student engagement that boost student success for the college. So to this end, let me quote from UMass Boston's For the Times strategic plan that was launched this fall, where student success is the #1 priority. I just want to quote what is said about this. UMass Boston will adopt a holistic framework for undergraduate and graduate student success and take steps to bring together stakeholders and align resources to support key focus areas. UMass Boston is committed to building diverse pathways to and through our institution and beyond, supported by holistic advising and support services and enhanced career success and alumni engagement. We at UMass Boston are committed to valuing the cultural wealth of our students. We commit to cultivating a deeper sense of belonging in our learning environments, and we commit to advancing equitable student outcomes. Finally, in support of student success at UMass Boston, we will demonstrate our educational effectiveness by promoting assessment that values a holistic approach to and continuous improvement in student experiences and student outcomes. So leveraging this student success agenda at UMass Boston, in the fall of 2022, McCormack's DOSS program achieved another hallmark. The first time in the school's 40-year history, let's say 20 years as a school, students from across the college that are here today, in person and certainly mostly online, they are the doctoral students, the master's degree students, the undergraduate students, the certificate students, in across various different programs: gerontology, global aging, global governance, international relations, public administration, public policy, gender leadership and public policy, and conflict resolution. They all came together and convened under the DOSS Ambassadors Group, short for DAG, to register a first-time college-level registered student organization called the McCormack Scholars Group. We're launching that program today, and our chair of our DAG group, Jadine, will talk about it a bit more in her remarks. So for now, I'd like to welcome you all to today's activities and the town hall. We are a diverse and local to global audience participating through several different modalities, in person and remotely. We have a lot of activities, especially opportunities for administrators, faculty and students to convene and deliberate on the issues of the day at UMass Boston and McCormack. And I'd like to welcome our special guests. Justin Meyer called this morning to say that he couldn't make it because he wasn't feeling well, but Justin is the Assistant Dean for Graduate Student Success at the Office of Graduate Studies, and he will follow up with us later about some of the input that he would have liked to present today. But we also invited Lexia Lavayulita, who is the educational coordinator for U Access, and our keynote speaker is Leah Escalara, who is the Vice Provost for Student Access, Equity and Success, SEAS, here at the University of Massachusetts Boston. There's also my colleague on the Provost Academic Leadership Council Cabinet. Thank you, Leah, for doing this. Should I just go ahead and introduce Leah, sir? Yes, so I'm going to introduce Leah so that she can come up and present her keynote for us today. Dr. Leah Escalara is the Vice Provost for Student Access, Equity and Success, SEAS, here at the University of Massachusetts Boston, with nearly 20 years of experience in public, urban, higher education. Dr. Leah Escalara is passionate about creating vibrant, inclusive, and equitable learning environments where all students can succeed and contribute meaningfully to their local and global communities. In her work, she focuses on transforming educational systems that were not designed to support the success of underrepresented students into asset-based spaces that value the strengths and ways of knowing diverse students, faculty and staff and community members. Her current research focuses on policies, pedagogies, and practices that value cultural wealth of Latinx students. Dr. Escalera holds an MA in English from Simmons College and ED.M in higher education from the Harvard Graduate School of Education and a PhD in higher education from UMass Boston. Today, she will address the topic of C's and UMass Boston's new strategic priorities around transformational student success, and hopefully help us at McCormack to see what this means for us and our student success. Thank you, Dr. Escalera.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you, Gifty, I appreciate it. So thank you for having me here today. Again, my name is Leah, and I joined UMass Boston about 2 years ago in the middle of the fall of 2020, when the university was virtually closed. There were some operations happening on campus, and I spent my first 9 months here in my own living room in front of my laptop, trying to connect with the campus community. And now that we are all back and there are opportunities to connect in person and hybrid modalities, I appreciate it so much because it's a very large, complex university, and I love the opportunity to engage with people across the colleges. McCormack has a very special place in my heart. Part of the reason for that is prior to working at UMass Boston, I was a dean at Bunker Hill Community College, and I worked there for 15 years. And one of the most important things that I did as dean was to hire an exceptional assistant dean who was really excellent and really helped me to do my work. And he was a graduate of the McCormack School. And when I interviewed him for the position, I said, tell me a little bit about your academic background and your research interests. And he said, Leah, I have the single most important educational background for working in the dean's office. And I said, really? He says, yes, I just graduated from UMass Boston in conflict resolution. And I thought that was fantastic. And he was right. He was incredibly diplomatic and helpful in building consensus around campus. Maybe some of you have had him in your classes. His name is Justice Kumahia. And he is a graduate of Bunker Hill Community College and then transitioned into UMass Boston for an undergraduate and a graduate degree, and then returned to Bunker Hill. So I have always thought very fondly of this program and the preparation that allowed him to be such an excellent colleague. So I'm going to tell you in about 10 minutes a 2-year story, and I will invite you to interrupt me as I said or ask questions. I'm going to breeze through kind of a number of data slides to give some context to the conversation. And I'll share all of this data with you. I'll send an email to Gifty to send out to the group. So if you have any follow-up questions or you'd like to dig in deeper, I invite you to contact me. So first, I just want to start with a land acknowledgement. This is an acknowledgement that draws on the work of the Upstander Project and the Pluralism Project, and also the work of our very own Native American and Indigenous Studies Institute. Those are some resources that have been helpful to me in my learning and unlearning related to the space we occupy on this particular peninsula and the impact of it on our work. So first I want to ask the question, why is transformation necessary? So we have been talking about strategic planning. The dean just mentioned launching into a transformative, is that how you called it? Yeah. Transformative year, which is exciting. And the area I oversee, which was formerly called Academic Support Services and Undergraduate Studies, has undergone some significant transformation as well. Part of that has come from this national focus in urban public institutions in particular, from access to equity. What that really means is it's not enough to open the door to students. We have to create the learning environments that will enable them to thrive on our campus and accomplish their goals. One really sobering piece of information that I've been digging into over the last couple of months, which comes out of the Massachusetts Department of Higher Education. So we have students come into public higher education. This is true of private also, but this particular study is on public education in Massachusetts. If they start and they don't complete a credential, a certificate or a degree, they're actually worse off than had they never gone to college at all. I find that incredibly sobering. And it makes the work that we do in supporting student success and finding ways for students to really thrive on our campus vitally important, because we want students to be able to maximize all of the benefits of access to higher education. And so we have seen over the last year from our new Secretary of Education calls for a change in how we think about student success in our own backyard. Carlos Santiago, who's the Commissioner of Higher Education, making similar calls, really focusing on how we achieve, how we recognize students' cultural wealth and how we achieve freedom. And some of the scholarship that's gone into this work in our unit, we have 3 professional development series that are running. We have a community of practice. So we have groups that meet throughout the semester focused on particular areas of interest. Some of those have been students' community cultural wealth, looking at equity-minded frameworks, thinking about what it means to be an institution that strives to promote anti-racism and strives to promote wellness and health. And so some of the scholarship we've been looking at is reflected here, and I'll move through it very quickly. These may be very familiar to some of you. If they're not familiar to you, they've really inspired and informed my work in particular. Gloria Ledson Billings, during the pandemic, this article actually came out the week I started at UMass Boston. And what she said was, you know, what we actually need in higher education to make it truly accessible and truly equitable in its outcomes is a hard reset. A hard reset, she got this term from the Apple Store. And so she had a problem with her cell phone and she took it to the Apple Store. She was hoping she would just hand it to somebody and walk out with the problem resolved. And the person she was working with came back to her after analyzing the phone and said, I have some bad news. Actually, what you need is a hard reset. What that means is really just wiping everything and going back to the factory settings. It's the worst news you can get if you have a lot of important photos and information on your phone, right? And as she was driving home from the Apple Store, she started thinking about what does it mean and what would it take to do a hard reset on some of the practices and policies within higher education that are actually perpetuating inequity and not moving us further toward equity and access. Sean Harper, who I worked with very closely at Bunker Hill and who was a consultant to our Center for Equity and Cultural Wealth there, he oversees the USC Race and Equity Center. And what he has talked about is really a failure of precise intentional language. And in particular, the phrase that he was discussing in this quote is cultural competence. And what I think is interesting is his example was, imagine if you are a department chair and you have a great candidate that you want to bring to your campus, and you go to your dean and you describe the candidate. Would you ever say, well, I find this person to be competent? Probably not. That's probably not what we're looking for. We're looking for excellence. And yet when we think about how to make a culturally responsive campus environment, for a while we have been focusing really on cultural competence and not really building the precise skill to help us do this work in a way that is so excellent that it moves some of the inequitable outcomes we're seeing, not only on this particular campus, but across the nation. And then lastly, Estella Ben-Simone, who coins the term equity-minded practice. She really asks us to question, when we're thinking about student success, who and what are we problematizing? And for many years in higher education, there has been a legacy of problematizing the students. What does that look like? It's calling them at risk, underprepared, unmotivated, finding ways to look at inequitable outcomes and blame the students, instead of really acknowledging that there are things about our systems of higher education that don't work for everyone. And it's our responsibility, all of us collectively as members of this community, to work toward making those systems more equitable. And so over the last year, I was one of the co-chairs of the Student Success Committee of the Strategic Plan. We were the only committee that had 2 student co-chairs. So my co-chairs were an undergraduate student and a graduate student. And the 3 of us worked together to design the work of the Student Success Committee and to engage the committee members in that work. Part of that work was to conduct 40 focus groups over 3 months across campus with students. And we took really an embedded approach What I find in research in higher education is that if you send a survey out to students, there is a particular student group that's going to be responsive, and there are student groups that are not going to be as responsive. And so when you look at the data at the end, it's not going to be reflective of the richness of our campus community. And so what we did was we looked at large enrollment courses like Introduction to Communication. We did 6 sections of Introduction to Communication, close to 1,000 students, so that we were capturing the regular experiences of students, not just students who were coming to us because they were having a wonderful experience or coming to us because something had gone wrong, but really the breadth of community members on campus. We met with student athletes, we met with students in ethnic studies, we met with graduate students, undergraduate students, master's level students, doctoral students. We held open town halls where anyone on campus could come, and then we very strategically embedded ourselves into all of these systems across campus so that we could get really an authentic view of what was going on with student success. And on top of that qualitative data, which I'll tell you more about, we started looking at the quantitative data, and I'm going to share some of that now. What you can see on the screen is that over the last 10 years, our undergraduate population has remained relatively flat. But we have seen a huge shift in the demographic composition of that undergraduate population. And so students who self-identify as students of color have shifted 12 percentage points from 70% in 2012 to 82% in, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong line, from 48% in 2012 to 62% in 2021. What we've also seen is a real shift from the number of students who are full-time. So we're seeing more and more full-time students and fewer part-time students. With graduate students, we were actually seeing not a flat enrollment trend, but decreased enrollment of 11 percentage points over the last 10 years. And while we did see, again, a real shift in students, the diversity of our graduate student population, we do see a big gap between the diversity of our undergraduate student population, which in 2021 was at 62%, and our graduate student population, which in 2021 was at 34%. And so I just want to note there were some interesting outliers that we saw in the data as well. So when we're thinking about our students sticking with us and making progress toward accomplishing their goals, that is less true for students who are part-time and who are first-generation college students. UMass Boston is not unusual in this. These are national trends that we would find on most campuses. We see the lowest retention rates for first-time, full-time Latinx students. We're retaining those students at lower rates than any other group on campus. And these are students coming to us directly from high school. These are not students who are coming to us through community college pathways or after taking a break. There is some good news in the outliers that actually marks a significantly different trend that we find nationally, which is that community college transfer students are retained at higher rates than any other group on campus. And part of the reason for that, we think, is because they have a record of successful college coursework before coming to us. So a lot of the transition they have figured out, and they're well prepared now to engage in their second higher education experience. And so I mentioned that a big part of the student success work is retention. And I wanted to highlight for you all the McCormack data in particular. So the bright pink line is McCormack. And this is undergraduate student retention in the first year. And this is a 10-year trend, again, from 2012 to 2021. The thick navy blue line, I know this might be a little hard to see depending where you're sitting, is our campus-wide retention rate. So I can see all of you kind of squinting and looking at it. This is not the direction we want that line to be going in. And so what we see here is a downward trend over the last 10 years, and really a more dramatic downward trend over the last 2 years. That is unsurprising given all of the challenges related to the pandemic, switching modalities, profound disruption on campus, off campus, in students' lives and their communities. But what we want to be doing is working together to figure out how do we make sure that students are persisting year to year and making what we call productive persistence toward their goals. So it's not enough to just come back. You need to be also completing those requirements that build toward your degrees. And you'll see McCormack is actually has some of the most high rates for first year retention, but like virtually all colleges across campus, the last 2 years have been incredibly challenging. And that's why we really need to prioritize student success moving forward. This is the 6-year graduation rate by college. And so this looks at a 10-year, sorry, you can't look at a 10-year trend yet because you need to wait patiently 6 years for these rates to come in. But this shows what happens when students start with us 6 years later. The reason we look at a 6-year graduation rate and not a 4-year is because most of our students will shift in and out of part-time. So it's very unlikely that our students will stay full-time for the full 4 years. So it's not a great measure. In the 6-year rate, you'll see from 2012 to 2016, pretty flat, slight improvement, really incredible improvement though in this college. So McCormack is really an outlier in terms of those 6-year graduation rates going back to 2012. I'm going to show one more slide before going back to that piece. Where this gets really concerning for me is when we look at first-year retention rates campus-wide. So this is no longer by college, but this is broken down by racial and ethnic groups. And so what we see here in 2012, we had pretty significant equity gaps between student groups. And we see overall a downward trend. And if you look at the 2021, our most recent data, what we've done is we've actually closed the equity gap pretty closely in the wrong direction. And so what we would wanted to see is these lines converging in the top right of the screen. And we're seeing a downward trend where really equitably distributed challenges for students in terms of first-year retention. And that's concerning. It's really important that we look at data and we slice and dice it, we disaggregate it in meaningful ways. If we're only looking at a college by college picture, we're going to miss what's happening across particular student groups. What's important also is not just to look at race and ethnicity, but to look at race and ethnicity at the intersection of gender. And so this last chart takes just that last data point, 2021, and it shows the differences between ethnic and racial groups for our male and female students. And so you can see we have pretty equitable retention rates for male and female identifying Asian American students. We see a gap in our Black student population. This is particularly notable because up until last year, our female Black student population was outperforming our male Black population by about 11 percentage points. And so when we talk about who was most disproportionately impacted by the last 2 years and the COVID pandemic, we see a disproportionate impact on our Black female members of this community. That isn't shocking. We have seen that in our broader society, and it's now reflected in our numbers, and it's something for us really to take seriously. How can we better support the success of that student population when we're seeing they have certainly been negatively impacted by the conditions of the last several years? Our Hispanic and Latino population also used to have a much bigger gap between male and female student retention. And we have seen our male student population retention pretty consistent and our female retention coming down. And again, we are seeing, as is reflected in a lot of the national research, a disproportionate impact on Black and Brown women. Our non-resident population, these are our international students primarily. This is not as good a metric because of the global conditions around the pandemic, because of the practices globally around visa access and travel access. There's so many external variables really impacting those numbers that I think we should take those within that global context. This is the perfect college to have that conversation. I know I don't need to tell any of you about that important aspect. And then our white students, pretty equitably retained across men and women, pretty equitably retained over the last 10 years. And so we're not seeing that impact of fluctuation in that student population. So these are numbers that may not be surprising to you, but may not have been front of mind when we think about the courses we're designing, the support services we're building, and the ways in which we're welcoming people onto our campus community and making sure that they're in an environment where they can thrive. Okay. And so what we have been doing in my area in Cs is really thinking about what we want to transform and what are the metrics we're measuring. Traditionally in academic support work, the metrics we've been trying to transform have been survival-based. When I say survival-based, I mean, did they show up the next semester? Did they cross the thing off the to-do list? Are they checking the boxes on the degree audit? That means they made it. Those are traditionally called survival-based outcomes. What we are starting now to take more seriously and to measure more precisely is thriving-based outcomes. So not just did they come back, how was their experience? How are we measuring their sense of belonging? Are we listening to how they experience our campus community? And would they describe our campus community as positive parts of their academic, personal, and career development? And so the framework we've developed in C's to measure that really has to do with this 2-access consideration of student success. And the quotes that you see on the screen are quotes from the focus groups we held with students right on campus. And they're meant to illustrate why it's really important that we're looking at all 4 dimensions of student experiences. And so students can be having positive outcomes. So if you look at the top left, I'm trying to think if my lefts and rights might be off the way you're looking at it and the way I'm looking at it. If you look at positive outcomes, negative experiences, we don't capture experiential data. We're just going to say, oh, this group has a great retention rate. They must be doing fine. This group has high GPAs. Let's not worry about them. And I think what this quote captures is that here is a student, really strong academic preparation, was able to get an internship that was highly sought after and competitive. And that could have been enough for us. But when we did reflections and focus groups with the students after and during the experience, what we learned was this was actually an experience that distanced the students from us as a community more than engaged the student, and really did not make the student feel fully supported as he went into this internship environment. And because career services and internships is in my area, this is something for me to think really carefully about. What are we preparing students for? How are we collaborating with employer partners to make sure that the ethic of care we have on campus is extended in their spaces? We also have students who are having really wonderful experiences, and yet we're not seeing that impact on higher retention, GPA, course completion rates. And so we want to think about if this is an experience that students are telling us is transformative, and you're really engaged and happy to be there, but you don't seem to be benefiting from that impact of these quantitative measures we want to see. How do we partner with faculty and staff in those areas to make sure that we're being as intentional as we can? How do we integrate support services? How do we make sure no one's falling through the cracks? Unfortunately, there are students on campus who shared that they were having negative experiences and negative outcomes in some of the ways they're interacting with us. And so one of the most common things we heard across campus was related to advising. And it's not that students are having negative experiences with advisors one-on-one, but the system of advising was working against them. So students would say things like, I have been here for 3 years and this is my 6th advisor. And I am sick of trying to build relationships with new advisors and find their offices and get what I need. They're all wonderful, except why does this turnover keep happening? You know, when we dig into that, we see we have had a lot of frontline staff turnover. And also our students tend to change their program of study on average 2 to 3 times while they're with us. So even if everything is going right and there is no turnover, when they change that program of study or change colleges, they're having to readjust to a new system and understand how to navigate. This is an unintended consequence of, the structure of higher education and the way our colleges are built. How do we make that easier for students to navigate and more seamless? Those are things we need to pay attention to. And then where you see the positive outcomes, positive experiences, we asked students in every focus group, and we met with close to 2,000 students, so it's a substantive population. 10 years from now, when you look back on your time at UMass Boston, how would you describe it if you were describing it as something that was successful and that you were glad you did? And so this is one student's reflection. This is what it would mean to me for this to have been a positive experience. And so the reason that we have developed this framework in C's is because what we're starting to do is plot our programs, our services, and our initiatives on this graph. What do we know quantitatively and qualitatively about student experiences? And it's important to know that because there are different interventions and different practices you would put in place if you want to move the outcomes vertically versus horizontally versus diagonally. And that precision and really understanding what's going on with the student experience here helps you design strategic plans to really carry out this vision that's been laid out in the strategic plan campus-wide related to holistic student success. That can very easily be rhetorical and meaningless. How do we actually start understanding what's going on with the student experience and where we need to be levers of change to move more students toward that quadrant where they are having both positive experiences and positive outcomes that allow them the full socioeconomic benefit of a degree in higher education? And so one of the things you may have noticed if you walk through the campus center is that we have a new name in our area. And there's a pillar outside of the first floor campus center space that has some new wayfinding and visualization that we're trying to help students point to us. So within C's, we have 16 different programs and initiatives. It is impossible to meet with every college and get all of you to memorize all of those things and find the right fit for the students you work with. And so what we really are trying to do is simplify, send people to C's. There's a pillar, there's a big word, it's in the campus center, it's next to the cafeteria, it's a place where students are familiar. And then we have developed a new welcome desk and triage process to make sure that students land with the services, supports, initiatives they need to be successful. But we're really trying to move away from explaining the breadth of programming we have and really just driving students to one simple entry point where we can then do triage with them and work with them and make sure they land in the right support service area. So we did ask close to, I want to say 500 students who have interacted in our area in different ways. What does this work mean to you that you've been engaged in across our advising, our career services, our academic supports, undergraduate studies, Success Boston, TRIO programs, pre-collegiate pathways, and we asked everybody who works in the area, so it's 130 faculty and staff and administrators. We asked them, what are those keywords that make meaning to what we do? And so this is just a Wordle with some of the most popular words. And this is actually how we developed the acronym C's. What we wanted was actually the way you described it, with student access, equity, and success, because access seems important as the first word. It doesn't work as beautifully for an acronym like C's when we're positioned in the campus center on the ocean. And so we really wanted to play into that metaphor of our legacy of being in this coastal physical space. And also, you know, sort of the double meaning of we see our students and we are trying to really make sure that they feel seen in their engagements with us. So this is the C's model. What had been previously about 16 different programs and initiatives has been reorganized into 3 key areas. And the reason for that is to allow fewer exit points across interactions with students. So, for example, our academic and career engagement and success area, ACES, used to be different units that did different kinds of academic advising and different kinds of career and work-based learning initiatives. And they would hand students to each other, but they were not meeting regularly, planning intentionally, sharing student caseloads, operating in the same systems that allowed them to share notes. And so what would happen is a student would meet with one of our advisors in the University Advising Center, and they would say, you need to make an appointment with career services. And the student would say, great, I will. And then they would not. And we would have students in career services meeting with students saying, you know, have you talked to your advisor about this? You should dig into these requirements. And there was a lot of intention around connecting the dots for students. But what we've reframed this to be as the student is now working with a pod of people that represent a spectrum of academic and career advising approaches. So they don't have to make 2 different appointments, use 2 different systems, understand 2 different intake forms to get that holistic academic and career attention they need. What we want ideally is for students' academic experiences to be informing the development of their career goals. We want the development of their career goals to inform the kinds of experiential learning, internships, undergraduate research they get involved in. And we want that to in turn help them refine their academic goals, right? So we want this to be a reciprocal and integrated conversation. And yet we had designed a set of support services that were very much siloed and we're really ping-ponging students across them to each other. What I learned in the focus group is that students call this the UMass Boston bounce. And it's really problematic when students are feeling bounced around from area to area and can't be in one place to get what they need. The other area that we have created under our new model is what we call pathways to and through UMass Boston. And this includes all of our pre-collegiate programs. So the TRIO funded programs, Upward Bound Math Science, Talent Search, Talent Hub. There are many programs we have in partnership with Boston Public Schools, with middle schools and high schools in Greater Boston. And these are the ways in which students really gain greater college knowledge, access to college pathways, and help them to navigate that road into UMass Boston. And then we added the to and through because this also includes our programming that we call affinity-based support services that really look at cohorts of students and making sure they're getting the support services they need from that access point to program completion. So these include things like our Asian American Student Success Services, our Success Boston program, which coaches Boston Public School graduates, our SSS TRIO program, which focuses on first generation underrepresented students. We have interventions for students who are registered with the Ross Center. And we are now building in partnership with different offices across campus, additional affinity-based support services coming out of the research we're seeing on which students have been disproportionately harmed by the last 2 years. And then lastly, our inclusive excellence team, which is led by our associate vice provost, a faculty appointed position, Linnell Thomas, and she oversees what we're calling inclusive excellence. What does that mean? It means all students need to be really focused on academic excellence and how do we make sure academic outcomes are inclusive. And so right now, when we look at student performance, we see those equity gaps we saw in the retention numbers. And so they are building interventions related to undergraduate studies, general education, tutoring programs. We're collaborating with the new campus-wide writing center. We're collaborating with the math department and thinking about resources that may support student skills in math. Really thinking about how to build a model that really sends a message to students that they're included in this work and that we're focused on their success. Part of all of this rebuild is a shift from deficit-based language to describe what we do to asset-based language. So what we heard from students in the focus groups is they don't want to go to the academic support center. That makes them feel like they're in high school and they're being sent somewhere for being less than. And we really heard that. And so we talked to them about, well, what do you want to be a part of? And they want to be a part of academic enrichment that's exciting, that speaks to who they are, that's reflective of their communities, the issues that they care about. And so we're really thinking about what message do we send, even in just hanging a sign over the office that explains the work. Academic support assumes this is where you go if you're already in trouble, if you don't have what you need, if we're worried about your success, where students like the idea of excellence, which is something they can be proud to be a part of. So what you'll see in our little statement here with the bullets is our mission statement for the unit that was built in collaboration with staff across the unit. We had 2 C's retreats where we really thought about, let's take a moment to pause and reflect on what we're supposed to be doing here. Do we all agree? And do we all have the skills and tools necessary to really enact this mission? And so this mission was created about a year ago. And the piece in blue is really what we're trying to focus on as we enact the strategic plan. How do we create spaces where students can learn, grow, thrive, and fully realize the promise of higher education? And so there's been a lot of change and transformation in our area. I know that it's been difficult to communicate across campus everything that's happening as it's happening, but appreciate the opportunity to just share some of this with you. And very open to also come back and share data specific to McCormack students, breaking them down between undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral students. This is the next level of the work, is when we see these high level trends, what do we see when we break the data down and we really disaggregate in meaningful ways? So I hope this is just the opening of the conversation and the opening of a partnership where we can work more closely together. I think this one.
Thank you so much, Laya, for your keynote speech and for your work on student success. I now open the floor and the people on Zoom to any questions that you may have. How about we start with in person, the people in the room? Does anyone have a question?
I have a question.
There we go. Now we can see you.
Who said that?
Me on Zoom.
Oh, Victoria?
Mm-hmm.
Please go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, so one question I have is about finding a career after graduation. That's one of my concerns, is how do I get started in finding a career in the fields of international relations after I graduate in the spring?
So I think what you're saying is exactly what we've experienced in career services. So one of the reasons that we integrated academic and career advising is because when we looked at who's actually meeting with career counselors and who's making appointments and who's coming to career fairs, it was mostly students in their last semester. And what we heard from so many students was, I heard about this amazing opportunity, but I was too late. Or my friend got to do this, but now I can't because I can't figure out, credit alignment. So a big part of this work is career development early and often. That's the most effective approach to it. And so we're trying to work toward that. But then also we recognize that as students are completing their programs and thinking about their next steps, that's a critical decision point also. And so I think, Victoria, I'd welcome you to engage with our career services group. There is almost, I would say 2 or 3 times a week, there are workshops, there are career fairs, there are college-based programs. And I think navigating that system can be challenging. We've just completely reframed our website. And the first thing you see when you go to career services now, maybe I can pull it up for you, is 3 buttons. Are you a graduate student, an undergraduate student, a non-matriculated student? Immediately, let's get you plugged into a career counseling conversation. So I think that would be your first step. And then that would be the best person to make you aware of sort of some of the breadth of opportunities we have across campus. Our career services area is primarily generalist, so it doesn't preclude all of the wonderful academic and career opportunities that are college-based as well. I think the approach we're trying to take is both and. We want students to have a breadth of opportunity, not one or the other.
Thank you so much. That answer is part of my question. My other question is for IR students, what fields do they typically go into after graduation? Is it nonprofit?
IR is international relations.
So I will be honest with you, Victoria, this is not my area of expertise. So I am not the best person to give you career coaching in this area.
We will have a faculty panel, so ask that question. Victoria, ask that question a few minutes later, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely engage with the faculty. And then we also have a lot of interactive tools that you can engage in with career services that help identify strengths and then match strengths, not only with broad careers, but with careers related to particular programs of study. So I think there's a lot of different ways to think about the answer to that question.
Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Hi there, Dave Packett, currently an employee in graduate McCormack, but also someone who works in academic support services. So pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Something that was really notable is that you described when students described the sort of feeling of moving from advisor to advisor, something called the UMass Boston bounce.
Well, I think they described multiple interactions as the
Yeah.
UMass Boston bounce. It was not advising specific. That was one example.
Of
Yeah.
course, unofficial, but something that was really interesting is that having sort of gotten involved in academic sport this last year and a half and noticing some of the on the ground footwork that's come with consolidating everything from student advising to engagement into sort of one fell swoop area at the first floor of the campus center. This might be a premature question to ask, but have you seen any changes in student outcomes, even over the first implementation of this? Because it seems like even from some of this is my 6th year on campus, seeing the new students who have come through that system, their experience is just being so much more positive, at least from, I think, where some students might have felt a couple of years back, the consolidation.
I'm so happy to hear you say that you're experiencing it anecdotally as positive. We are seeing about 5 to 6 times the amount of student traffic, but we're coming out of COVID. So I am hesitant to ascribe, the positive student interaction to only this shift. I think that students are hungry to reconnect. They really want to sit down with someone, maybe more so than they did before. We have classes of students who were introduced to the institution entirely virtually, who are now really feeling new again, even though they may be in their 2nd or 3rd year. And so we have had just tremendous student outpouring. Because of our location, the campus center, we do serve a particular caseload of students, but we see students across the whole university because students walk in and we don't turn anyone away. So we have seen students across the colleges and we have been bustling. It's been very busy in that space. We haven't had time to assess these changes in a meaningful way yet, but I'm glad to hear that you're experiencing them as positive. That's great feedback.
Thank you very much.
Do we have any other questions on Zoom? Yes, Professor.
Hi, I'm Michael Johnson, and thanks for a great presentation. Could you tell us a bit about the advising models that you see across our different colleges, UMass Boston and if there's a particular college's advising model which you find really effective.
So I want to be sensitive not to speak to the work of areas that I don't oversee and haven't assessed formally. So I want to be respectful of all that work. The core challenge that I see at UMass Boston is not really about advising practice. I see really strong advising practice across campus. What I don't see to the extent that I would like to see is a system that allows students to move between and among advising offices without as much disruption. So I think that's the core challenge. I really value having college-based advising offices. I think that's critically important. I don't think we want a one-size-fits-all. I don't think we want a centralized model. But what we don't want either are islands of advising that operate entirely differently from each other, so that students have to figure things out in a way that's, you know, an opportunity cost for them. We want their thinking and their engagement to be on their coursework and not so much figuring out systems that are complicated. And so I would like to see us have a stronger core of advising systems, practices, technologies that allow us to really capture that holistic student experience. But I think there's something to learn from all the advising offices, honestly. I think there's a lot of student-centered practice that's really excellent. But if the system isn't designed to fit together intentionally, I think that doesn't add up to what it could add up to if we had some core coordination.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to follow up by saying I appreciate the need to center student advising in the colleges where they're residing, but there are also students with multiple majors across colleges, or majors and minors across colleges, or students who are doing 4+1 advanced master's programs, where there could be an opportunity for a single point of contact for students with like multiple loyalties.
So I will be very candid, that's not a challenge we've figured out, but I agree with you that it's a critical problem. And so this fall, a advising working group came together and was convened, and they have been meeting every other week all semester. They're going to be meeting for the year. And the goal of the group is to make recommendations to the provost office about how we improve some of this systemic advising challenges. And historically, the advisors have been meeting, the advising directors have been meeting, you know, with their deans and with their faculty and college by college. There hasn't really been a campus-wide conversation about the structure of advising. The advising collaborative has really been wonderful in offering professional development, talking about practice, but we need to start digging into, we all know anecdotally because we have the students in front of us where they're getting stuck. Where do you send that information to? Who's got their eye on globally where students are getting stuck and fixing those problems? That's part of the reason this group came together. But honestly, we have a lot of work to do. And so I think we're just at the beginning of that conversation.
You have another question?
Sure.
Hi, Leah. Thank you so much for doing this. I have a quick question about your, you had a set of graphs, bar chart up there a while ago, where you're looking at intersectionality of students. You're looking at gender and you're looking at race and so on, and international status and so on. But there's, I think, a big oversight with students with disability. And I find that I don't see that a lot in the data. And it is a major challenge. And you're coming from Bunker Hill, and I think you all know that is a challenge for students that end up through the community college pipeline. And if those students are coming to UMass, then we need to put support services in place for them. And we've even had events and so on, and we've had to kind of, you know, seems like a hustle and bustle to get resources to deal with students like that.
Yeah.
So I think that's a major gap that I'm not seeing in the data. I do know that there's great work that is being done through, you know, Ross Center and so on. Well, I think we need to kind of include that more in student equity and access. What's your take on that?
I could not agree more. And the Student Success Committee, so the couple of charts I showed you, we have about 75 of those. So we looked at Pell eligibility, we looked at Boston Public School graduates, we looked at in-state, out-of-state, we looked at students registered with the Ross Center. All of that really fed into this model. It's too much to share in a way that's digestible, but if you're interested, I'm happy to share, you know, a larger data set. but it's something we do need to look at. What I can tell you that we're seeing in the Ross Center, and we're very mindfully building capacity in the Ross Center because we've seen more students registered than ever before. And we're seeing a complexity of reasons students are registered with the Ross Center that's different than in the past. When most students were operating remotely, for a set of students who are registered with the Ross Center, that actually worked better. And for a set of students that did not work better, there are a lot of different learning styles. There are a lot of different environments that support different groups of students. It's not a one size fits all. It's really developing this matrix of interventions and partnerships with faculty and departments and colleges so that we can make sure students can navigate acceptably. But your point, if you've seen this as a growing population, we're seeing that too. And one of our big strategic goals going into next year is for the Ross Center not to be a place that simply accommodates students, but really plays a bigger role in faculty and staff development around universal design and around strategies that support the success of more students. And so if there's a student in your classroom who needs an interpreter, do faculty feel comfortable that I know how to maximize the experience for that student? Am I cognizant of what it means if a student has a note taker and how to set that student up for success? These are not things that you just intuitively figure out. I mean, we need to take them as a serious part of our pedagogical practice. So one of our goals as we're developing the capacity in that area is to be a little more external facing than we have been, because we've been primarily working with students one-on-one. And so we're looking to build that. So I think it speaks to your point that it's a need we see too.
Okay, great. Fantastic. Well, I guess we can we'll let you go now. I feel like we've had you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I could just make just one last note, I think the most important thing to this work is real, meaningful, ongoing engagement with students, staff, and faculty across campus. And that's not always easy on this campus, on any campus, and especially with the hybrid modality. So anything that I said speaks to you or you'd like more information, I just invite you to drop in, send me an email. I would love to have a lot more interaction like this than seems to be practical in our day-to-day life on campus. So let me know how we can move that along.
Fantastic.
And thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Celia. All right, so let us quickly move on to our panels. We're gonna skip the remarks from myself and JD, and we'll move to panel A. So I invite Sammy Barking, Professor Barking, to the podium, as well as Jack Lee, who's a graduate program administrator for outreach and recruitment in the public policy department. Also, Ruth Anderson, who is a graduate program administrator for student services and retention. And they are virtual, so go ahead and pin them. And Sammy, join us as well.
Given the timing, might make sense to do both panels at once.
Both panels at once? Yeah, why not? Let's do that. Yeah.
Just tell us what the two panels are.
So the other panel, which would have been panel B, includes Professor Michael Johnson. Could you grab a few chairs, those two chairs, and could you just move them over here? Yeah. Let's do a mashup of that. Yeah, why not? So we have Professor Barkin, who is a professor and program director in the global governance, the conflict resolution, global governance, human security and global governance program. There's also Jeff Stokes, sends his apology, wasn't able to make it, assistant professor of gerontology and graduate and undergraduate program director. We also have Professor Michael Johnson, who is the MPA graduate program director. Also Ellen Burchana, who is a graduate program director and clinical assistant professor in the gerontology department. And this panel will be moderated by Janelle Fassi, Rebecca Yemo, Rebecca, and also Satare, who is online. Could you pin Satare up there as well as a panel? Okay, you're already in. And Fernanda is absent today. She just sent her remarks. And then Adana. Where is Adana? Yes, Adana.
Right, you're gonna have to give them the mic.
So we have a set of questions that students have responded to a survey, and then there's also questions that students received from reaching out to their different constituents. So the first set of questions, Rebecca, you can take the even number questions, and then Adana, you can take the odd number questions. And then you pose them to the audience, all right?
Thank you for coming. I don't know if you're going to, but anybody can answer. From our student survey, we got a couple of questions that going here. Do you think that your program is advertising and our recruit students program?
This one here. No. I think that there are, my program is public administration. And I think we have very skilled staff who are taking great advantage of social media and emails to publicize our events and to organize things like open houses. But I think there's more that we can do to connect with affinity groups in the community so that we can get more and stronger applications from people from traditionally underrepresented groups, domestic minority groups, and that we can take advantage of new communities that have risen up over the past few years, such as Boston, Wild Black. And that there's much more work that I, as program director, can do to make my program visible to communities across the city. Program I direct is a doctoral program that recruits broadly internationally in a way that's very difficult to intentionally advertise for. Our students tend to find us. So it's quite one wants to have as visible web presence, et cetera, as possible. Some other programs in my department do recruit in ways more akin to Michael's. And as with any kind of advertising and recruitment, one does what one can with the resources available. I think we make a reasonably efficient use of our recruiting resources. Would we like to have more resources, particularly more money available for advertising? Yes. But those are not decisions that are made on the program director level.
I work in the gerontology department. We have a PhD program, 2 master's programs, and undergraduate program. We do our best to recruit students from internationally, but all over the country as well. The master's program is online and it's available to everyone. Working in the field of aging is just a little bit different because it's really, it takes the population of people who want to work with older adults is not everyone. You have to have an affinity and an interest to work with this particular population. And so our recruitment is often a little different. We work working across the country with a variety of organizations because we want to grow the field. And we want the field to reflect our population. We're a very white field and we are working to develop opportunities for more C-suite positions for people of color. It's not always easy to do because when you're 18, 19, 20, you're not thinking about working with older adults. And by the time you're 30 or 40, you're in a career where you're moving forward or at least in a direction that is not always easy to shift into. So we could use, as the Italian University could use more resources for recruiting and engaging people to become more interested.
May I add that I see opportunities for the public administration program and others like it to create stronger connections to professional societies and organizations that can start chapters within the college and provide better access to professional opportunities. And work that I'm doing through the Trotter Institute for the Study of Black Culture reminds me that we have 4 institutes on campus: the Trotter, the Gaston Institute for Latino Policy, Institute for Asian American Studies, Institute for New England Native American Studies, that are also potentially very strong partners for all of our programs in McCormack for student outreach and marketing.
Anybody online to answer? Jack Lee or Ruth Anderson?
I think Michael was able to cover most of the topics on that one, but definitely for the other questions, I am happy to chime in as well.
I think there's a question about the reward
Yep. Can you ask? Okay, sorry. Yeah, so we had a few questions about the reorganization and how the school is dealing with that. More specifically, how we can deal with some of the transparency around it and providing transparency for students.
Which one of you would like to start on that?
I didn't realize there was any transparency around it. At the faculty level, we at this point genuinely don't know what's going on. So that limits our transparency beyond saying that. I would note though that the reorganization is about what happens at the college administrative level. There's no reason that any of the reorganization processes should affect students in programs. It will not affect organization at the program level at all. So while I would certainly encourage your interest in university level affairs and in improving the transparency around the process, I would also at the same time stress that that this is not something that you need to be directly concerned about in the context of your own program, in the context of your own degree course.
Thank you. Let me try to answer that question for the faculty. And I think Professor Barking is on the one hand right on the other hand, maybe not. Of course, you're all McCormack scholars. All of our students are McCormack scholars as we know it today. And I know that public affairs and public service education is, because of the interdisciplinary nature of that discipline, it's not always understood how our disciplines relate to each other. So we might think, for example, that gerontology and aging studies is dramatically different from conflict resolution studies or international relations or public policy. But I'm here to tell you that they're not. They are all public affairs interdisciplinary disciplines. And these are transformative new disciplines that really engage the new economy that we're in. They're not traditional disciplines like political science or like a natural science. They are interdisciplines. So for 20 years, McCormack has evolved its interdiscipline as a public affairs, small school college. And all of you have been part of that in significant ways. But currently, the university is experimenting with a university level reorganization of its colleges. And that does affect the way in which it might organize McCormack, or might organize the College of Liberal Arts, or might organize the College of Nursing and Health Sciences. So the college and the administration, the Provost's office and the Chancellor's office have put together a task force where they are considering reorganizations that affect our college. Transparency is as much as we have tried to give you. Currently, there have been no decisions made. The provost is exploring ideas and soliciting feedback on the best ways to organize public affairs college like ours. So I know there's a lot of rumors flying around, specifically that McCormack will look very different in terms of transferring 3 CLA departments into McCormack, and those would be sociology, economics and political science. That's one model that is being explored. Another model that is being explored is to transfer our gerontology program to the College of Nursing and Health Sciences. But there have been no decisions. The provost is soliciting your feedback, your input, and there have been no decisions made. So Janelle, thank you for your question. In terms of the transparency of it, because of the exploratory, tentative, voluntary nature of the way that the provost has rolled out the plan, that is why there hasn't been any sort of clear-cut, communication around it. It's still just something that he's exploring with a range of constituencies. Our position is, again, that you are all McCormack scholars. I'd like you to remember that as you experience your education here at McCormack, very differently, I think, from the way it might be experienced elsewhere because of the nature of your public service education. But also remember that when you intern and when you receive your job placements and the kinds of careers that you are best suited for. And so currently, McCormack scholars, and we hope that the product of the reorganization, when it and if it eventually happens, keeps our school intact as a public affairs and public service educational school, which is interdisciplinary. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Kiki.
I think I should ask further concerning the reorg. There's been some talks that talk about that the reorganization, what it portends for students, because there's been talks that it might diminish the potential or the stability of public affairs, public policy, because naturally they do not consider public policy as really a true science, right? Where you have a Department of Economics and Political Science that have very strong presence in even then, around us, it might diminish the importance of public policy. So a lot of people in public affairs and policy seem a little bit, cautious about that kind of representation. What does it pretend for us at that?
And that's an important question, again, and an important implication. That's why I wanted to emphasize that to Professor Barkin's question, of course it affects you as students who identify with a discipline, and to underscore that we identify with the interdisciplinary discipline of public affairs writ large, which includes public policy, public administration, conflict resolution, global governance, human security, global aging, gerontology, did I miss anything? Gender, leadership. These are all public affairs disciplines. They're not political science disciplines per se, nor economic disciplines. I take your point and the point of your colleagues to emphasize that the McCormack School for the past 40 years has been evolving the interdiscipline of public affairs, which includes public policy, but is not only policy. Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I'd like to add that that yes, the discussions about reorganization are very preliminary, but I'd like to suggest that a new McCormack College, if it were to include multiple departments from other units, like College of Liberal Arts, could benefit our students' experiences in this way. Many of our classes might get students from a wider variety of programs than we have now, and that could enrich your experience in class to have students not only from your degree program, but from multiple others as well, brings more experiences into the classrooms. And some of my colleagues who have students from all across campus have testified to that. There's also the possibility that you may have access to electives from a broader variety of programs that are available to you now, as well as access to broader number of faculty from different experiences. Finally, other departments that could be in McCormack will provide opportunities for undergraduate students who participate in 4+1 or advanced master's programs to be in our classrooms, and again, to enrich the experiences in the classroom.
Let me just respond to that. Mr. Johnson is absolutely right, and we can do that now. We can do that without reorg. And I'd like you to remember the message that Dr. Escalera gave us. We need to be working across disciplines already. We are, the biggest emphasis is that we are interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary. And so always remember that, regardless of whatever happens with reorganization, that we do need to remember that we should be synergizing with other disciplines. You need some political science, you need some econ, you need some sociology, right? You need some aging studies and gerontology, as well, and vice versa, right? So what reorg does, I think, is that it expands our boundaries and our notions of policy across disciplines, for example, right? So the emphasis is students shouldn't be worried. Students shouldn't be worried about, their education. If reorganization happens, their education will be enriched. If reorganization doesn't happen, their educational will be enriched. So we don't want you to worry about reorganization. It is really just a provost level and a dean's level, college level, sort of conversation about universities balancing of college offerings, in relation to the allocation of resources. It really should, at the end of the day, enhance student success and not destroy it. But once again, you are McCormack scholars. You should remain McCormack scholars, and you need to really try to remember that that means that you are interdisciplinary scholars. Okay, all right.
And I just want to add to Kiki's point. I think it's a great point, and I just want to say that the staff of the Department of Public Policy will continue to support the students, look for their interests first, and also, look for their student success and work for their student success.
Thank you. So on to the next question. Some students are curious to know what plans are in place to increase student funding beyond the third year. I think this would be mainly for doctoral programs. So Sami is laughing because he knows this question. So
I was laughing because we need to fund master's students beyond their third year. Time to completion issues are an issue. Having said that, I don't quite know how to answer something like that.
Our public policy PhD program provides full graduate assistant funding for full-time students for 3 years. And students have consistently expressed the challenges they faced in securing funding for after the third year. And I'm speaking as an instructor, not as an administrator, but also as an advisor. And I believe that it's the responsibility of each of instructors like me to ensure that students know of research funding opportunities with a variety of faculty, so that they can help prepare funding proposals that they can be a part of to support their work from third year and beyond. That they know of programs like the Honors College Teaching Colloquium that provide training for student instructors so that they can be instructors of record in the third year and beyond, and increase their potential for being instructors afterwards. But most importantly, for working with their advisors to find a path towards timely completion of their dissertation proposal and field research towards their dissertation, so that the time after the dissertation proposal in years four and onwards are focused on research and work that supports the research, as opposed to work that does not support the research.
Just to sort of speak a bit on that, I don't have an answer to that. Obviously, I'm not faculty. I'm one of the students who wishes we had more. But just to sort of emphasize how problematic it is, because essentially right from the beginning, I mean, we do appreciate the fact that we do get funded at all, because that is significant. But from the very beginning, you are not funded for the summer. So every year you have to think of what you're going to do for the summer. And then if you're like me and you are in your third year, now almost a semester left to start thinking about that additional fourth year and beyond pressure, that's a lot, because then now you're thinking not just about your research, you're thinking about funding, and you're thinking not just any funding, but funding that, like you said, is not too bothersome to affect your time to completion, because at some point you want to finish the program. So it's a difficult situation to be in. And I guess the wonder is, we are not in Europe, whereby you're not required to maybe do coursework and you just transition straight into research. And so it's possible to finish a PhD in 3 years, as is the experience of some people. But here, it's just not even possible. So you wonder what can be done at that top level to at least acknowledge the fact that it's not possible to finish this in 3 years. So at the very least, 4 to 5 years of guaranteed funding is enough, because even if students want to finish against their better, it's not possible because you are stuck with 2 years, at least 2 years of coursework. And you cannot possibly do your research alone, finishing the 3rd year. So it's a bit of a struggle. And I guess for some of us, we wonder what can be done at the top to make that possible. Is there something that maybe not necessarily the faculty, but how can they convince the higher ups to at least add another year of funding? Because we know that for some other PhD programs on campus, due to several factors, they are able to get that. And so we wonder what opportunities are there to at least make it even 4 years funding, because 3 years is an extreme sport, I would say, very extreme.
The programs that offer 4-year funding are generally getting that 4th year from grants, which are more often than not probably along with the government agencies that fund the sciences. Unlike Europe, unlike Canada and Australia and Japan, the United States does not fund social sciences. I'm not a fan of that decision, obviously. So funding for increasing the time of funding in areas that are not as rich in grant funding potential means taking the funding from somewhere else. So when we go to the senior administration and ask for higher stipends or ask for 4 years of funding, which we do all the time, they say, tell us where to get the money from. Tell us what whose other doctoral program to cut so that we can fund yours more. We don't have an answer for that. So we at the professorial level, we entirely agree with you. At the professorial level, we don't have access to the funds. All we can really do is keep making the argument and do that.
So I'd like to add that when I've heard conversations about graduate student funding, I've heard from upper administration that that funding is quite limited and that there's a trade-off between more money available to support doctoral students and fewer graduate assistantships overall. So they say, sure, we can increase the amount or the length of funding, but it means fewer GAs. Or they'll say, maybe there's a possibility for more funding, but in return, we will ask for more of our graduate assistants to teach, or to be teaching assistants as opposed to research assistants. That's all I can say about that trade-off. I'll say something else that one model of doctoral student advising that I have come to be comfortable with is in the first year or two for doctoral students to primarily support their faculty advisors' research agendas. And I'll speak only for myself as an advisor, that I would welcome the opportunity to work with students to craft their research agendas much earlier than in my program in the 3rd year when they enter dissertation workshops, so that students have a good idea earlier on what their likely dissertation topics will be, so that in their 3rd year they can transition much more quickly to a dissertation proposal. This will mean for faculty supervisors changing the balance of emphasis in the work that they supervise for their doctoral students. Maybe slightly less work on their own faculty members' research agenda and slightly more emphasis on their own doctoral students' research interests.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think there's a hand raised up on Zoom, so let's get that.
Professor Miller.
Yes, hi. I guess I can speak to gerontology in relation to this student funding issue. we try to fund students as long as they need funding. We get a certain limited number of funding lines from the state. And so we rely primarily on grants and contracts and relationships with community partners and other academic partners to fund our students. And so, we can only guarantee, technically funding on a year-to-year basis according to university policy and the GEO contract. But we, in practice, we generally fund students as long as they need funding. And students are very different. Some, after the third year, when they dissertate, they do it elsewhere, they get jobs. I mean, there's lots of paths students take. And so the funding needs of students really vary, depending on what their plans are. But there's likely more opportunities for generating external funding in certain fields, and probably aging and gerontology is one of those. And that's why we're able to use the grants and contracts and community relationships to do that. But that's just the number of years, as we spoke about. A key issue is the amount of funding, right, per year, right, and the adequacy of that funding, given the cost of living and particularly in the Boston area. And we do our best. We recently learned that students can, we to supplement their, obviously, their incomes over the winter. If there's a 2-week winter session, they can earn additional income working on projects or other work at the university. They can work over the summers, of course, and they can work, depending on what their academic demands are. They can work additional hours above their assistantships, above the 18 hours on an hourly basis. So this is just something to keep in mind as you're sort of thinking about your funding needs and the types of opportunities that might be available for which we can support you and which you can seek out for yourselves. So.
Thank you very much. I think student funding will always be a topical issue for students, right? But I like the fact that you're encouraging students to liaise with their advisors and the faculty to find solutions for themselves. This is a really good one. Some most students actually didn't know that they could actually provide them the advisors to create a creative path for themselves in getting funding for their programs. Taking us away from funding, we want to also talk about mental health. Graduate school is actually a really peculiar task for students and people who have put their minds to furthering education. It might not be easy to deal with the rigors of graduate schools in time. So are there plans or programs that are based to deal with students that don't have the well-being on that?
Graduate school's tough. Life is tough, especially the last few years. It's been very, very difficult for everyone, but students especially. And it's really important for all of us to take care of ourselves first, because if we don't do that, we can't take care of anyone else. As program directors, I think we all try to be really high touch, highly interactive, and supportive of students. There are lots of resources at the university that we can refer students to, but we can also be supportive in terms of listening and being open so that we know what students need. And so we can help them to find the resources they need to be safe and well. And that's a major priority. I think just for the last couple of years in the field of aging, it's been really difficult. I'm sure you know that it's impacted the field of the pandemic impacted older adults significantly. Most of our students work in the field and experience tremendous loss and just horrific conditions, working conditions. So in order to support students, it was really important to listen and to find resources, even in our online students, where they're across the country, find resources in their local communities so that they can get the supports they need to be well. Because we need people to make our world better in every system. And so we need to support our students.
When I started as director of the Master of Public Administration program, I communicated to students that I had regular office hours, that I was a primary point of contact for all advising questions, along with our staff, our graduate program administrator for student services and retention, and that they could feel welcome to contact me anytime for any questions. I've also communicated that to the doctoral students that I teach. I've sometimes had to ask them to please come by office hours for questions. And as a result, some students have felt comfortable sharing with me concerns they have about their in-class teaching experiences. And in response to that, I have modified my own teaching curriculum to address issues like active learning, or ways that students can think about academic integrity, or different models of learning for doctoral students. So I think that if you have concerns about your in-class or out-of-class experience, then you should feel welcome to share those with your graduate program directors. As a graduate program director, I'll say it's my job to listen to you and to your instructors. And I'll say one thing more about the teaching experience. I found from colleagues that I work with in the Center for Innovative Teaching that providing spaces in class for students to check in, to talk about their mental health inside and outside the classroom, of letting students know that deadlines need not be fixed, that we understand life complications, I think can go a long way to students understanding that instructors see them as human and understand the challenges they face in meeting their daily responsibilities.
Thank you very much. Before we close on well-being, the fact that the university understands that going through the hybrid process in class, in person and virtually, helps a bit, right? Well, what we do see also is the loss of touch right now. People are no longer in tune with their cohorts of their program. We know that graduate school can be a very lonely journey, right? So do you think that in the long run, that the hybrid program will continue to be something like an option for the school, or is it going to be encouraged? Do you think it's something to be encouraged, or do you see a gradual coming back together, or the new normal just between the norm?
I'd like to address this from the perspective of the Master of Public Administration program. We are exploring opportunities to collaborate with the Collins Center for Public Management, and they provide support for municipalities all across the state. And so I hear that there are many prospective students who look at programs like our NPA, but wonder how they can do it if they live 1, 2, 3 hours outside of Boston. And our response has been that our programs, while synchronous, are accessible to students, whether inside the class or outside the class. I think that'll continue to be the case. And I think we'll find students who live far from Boston, who have hardships coming in every single day, taking advantage of the hybrid option. And I welcome that. But I also know that there are certain kinds of interactions that are richest in person. And I welcome students who might otherwise think, well, I'll just do the class at home, to see whether they might personally benefit from coming in just a little more, to have really sort of rich conversations in person that are a little harder to have online.
No, it's just nothing that we've been had a bit of time.
No, good, okay. The program, the Management Innovation Services program is 100% online. And yet we've structured it so that we require a minimum of 5 synchronous meetings for each class. We structure the curriculum so that there are group projects and group interactions. We are available, we offer what we call virtual office hours, where we invite students, alumni, and people from the field to discuss issues every month. We work together on a variety of different community projects. And they're all over the country. I'm shocked about how interactive we managed to be. What shocks me most is I don't really keep up with people from graduate school when I went, of course, centuries ago. But we have students, graduate students, who keep up with each other, who keep in touch with us. We have alumni who continue to keep in touch with us. We have students who live in different states who have started businesses together, who work together and meet at conferences regularly, and who continue to keep us informed about their interests and their work and their progress. It can be done. It is not easy, because we really want to foster a family, a community. And we do, but it is a lot of work, and it's a different approach. And it starts from the very first class you take, and it continues throughout your career.
Anyone online?
Yeah, I do have some comments on that. As a double beacon myself, meaning I was here at UMass Boston for my undergraduate and then for my graduate MBA. I personally believe that, you know, networking is the other half of the degree. At the Department of Public Policy, you know, we hear students talking about concerns of, you know, isolations as well, and how this remote hybrid, you know, modality will work out for them. And I would say that for our department, every semester, even for this semester, we create events, networking events, social events, and we cater to, you know, the different modalities. We do some events in person, some events, you know, exclusively online, but we also do a hybrid fashion. And just like an event we had last month, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, we did a, you know, post-election discussion event, and we could see that half the room was in person and half the room was, you know, online. And we tried to, you know, find a balance between the two. And, you know, we hear of people's concerns, and we want to make ways and solutions to address it. Michael had a, yeah.
So I wanted to make these closing comments. One is that as an instructor and as a program director, I want to do my best to center student success and well-being, and to understand that it may look different for different students at different times. And I also want to hold myself accountable as an instructor and as an administrator to ensuring a rich experience for every student, and for students to understand that they in turn can and should hold their instructors and their administrators accountable to ensure that they work together for community success.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
That's
you.
it. We have.
Thank you, Austin.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, so just quickly, we'll have Janelle, you just introduce our next guest. And after that, we have Hassan, who will just do a brief introduction of the Discovery Justice Fellowship Program, and then we'll adjourn. We'll leave.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lexia. I'll stand. I'm gonna make this really quick. I usually have right here. Okay. I usually have an entire presentation that I present, but over Zoom, you won't be able to see it. So I'll just talk about it really quick. I'm from UAccess. I'm the education assistant at UAccess. I basically run the ambassador program we have. I do presentations like this to try to get the word out about our program. Basically, our program is we try to fight on-campus poverty, which is very high. About 60% of students experience at least one insecurity, housing insecurity, food insecurity. It's pretty high on campus, and we try to fight that. We have a food pantry. That's our biggest thing. We have a bunch of donations. We're a nonprofit organization, so everything we have is completely donated. So we can't buy anything ourselves unless the money is donated to us, or we literally get shipments once a week, and then we organize it, we put it in bins, and then we make produce bags, which is also another thing. A lot of people come for bread, eggs, produce bags, and we have a massive clientele. It's really amazing what we do. We also provide meal swipes. So say a student's hungry, they can go get, it's actually meal swipes are donated from other students that have like guest swipes, and they don't use them ever. So we use those and we give them out to students so they can have a nice hot meal for dinner, lunch, or breakfast. They just go to the dining commons and swipe that. We also have on-campus lockers that we provide students. Living situations, we see a lot of situations where there's housing insecurity here. There's not always, some students don't always have a place to put their clothes, their laptop, their athletic gear. We actually provide on-campus lockers that are free to store to students. Everything we have is free to students. Another big thing we have is weekly pizza. We have a weekly pizza program and Dunkin's program. A lot of students come in weekly just to get a snack, because a lot of students, in order to do good academically, you need to be fed, you need to be healthy, or it seriously affects your academics. So we constantly provide snacks and hot food, salad wraps. It's crazy the amount of donations that we get. And we're here to help the students and make sure they're well fed, they're in safe living conditions, and can do their academics. Like their well-being is our main priority. And we are paying as students a lot of money to be here, and we might as well, be able to provide them with food and roof over their head. That's really all I have to say, unless anyone has questions. We are located in Campus Center on 2nd floor. But does anyone have any questions? All right. I really appreciate you guys having us. And you could stop at any time to get a snack.
Look forward to your information.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, let's see that.
Can everyone see me from?
Yep. I stole.
Like here? Yeah. Sure, awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Hassan. I work with Discovering Justice, which is a nonprofit down at the Mobley Courthouse in Seaport. And basically the essence of what Discovering Justice does is that it connects communities to examine the inner workings of the justice system and to encourage people to, especially young people, to participate in our democracy. We do a lot of civic education programs. Mainly we have 3 major programs. One of them is a K-5 civic education program that's done in school. The second one is a mock trial program, which is from grades 6 to 12, where we bring kids down into the courthouse to learn the justice system, to interact with legal attorneys who volunteer with us. And eventually, multiple times a year, we do what's called a mock trial program, where we have the kids really learn to participate in the justice system and do a trial as if they were the ones that were, actually in that trial. And it's really cool for them, and we see a lot of students who are really inspired by this, and it makes them want to go into public advocacy, makes them more interested in becoming public defenders and attorneys, and just getting involved with the justice system. And the third thing that we do is we do tours of the Moakley courthouse and other courthouses as well. These are generally just educational tours, getting to know the people involved, getting to see where all of the action happens in the legal system. And why I'm here today is because we're actually recruiting 4 fellows for the spring semester. We're hoping it would be about 25 hours a week, but there is some flexibility with that if you want to do more or if you want to do less. And the kind of people that we're looking for, honestly, we have there's a lot of different aspects to what we do in the nonprofit. But generally, we were hoping people would be interested in civic education, public advocacy, the justice system, education, curriculum building. We do a lot of things. My coworkers and I think we all have really diverse talents. And so, whatever you're interested in, as long as it falls sort of within the general scope of what Discovering Justice does, we'd be happy to have you. And I brought some information sheets as well and some business cards just so you have some information. And for the people that are online as well, you can see me, yeah. I'll make sure that my info gets sent out in an email to everyone so you can contact me as well. And you can shoot me an email too if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, that is time. Went over just a little. Thank you so much to those who are online. I see Eddie Miller, Professor Miller. Thank you to the DOSS ambassadors, Professor Patel, and so many of you that have joined. Thank you so much for this time. And we have questions that the students have sent in, and we'll email those out to the faculty so you can always respond and pass those around to your students. So thank you so much. We'll see you next time around next semester. Bye.